I wanted to directly address the troubling, serious, and false allegations against me. Any accusation of non-consensual behavior is categorically false.
Everyone has withdrawn their endorsement of Platner, and I think the allegations are suspicious. I'm just going to say it.
She had said something in the text message exchanges that he mistook as an invitation.
Just believe women. I don't believe anybody without evidence. Empowering people to destroy somebody else simply by accusing them of something.
Was he targeted? Oh, there's no question. I mean, you'd have to be brain dead. You'd have to be Mitch McConnell not to see that he was targeted.
Even if it happened, it's clearly being used for political purposes, which I don't like.
Jenny had been texting him, talking about a massage.
If someone entered my home and forcibly me, I would not allow the individual who forcibly me, that's violent, right, to remain in my home and sleep it off. But that is what she did. She alleges that he was so drunk that she didn't want to tell him to leave because he might harm someone on the road. He just forcibly you, right? Call the cops, or more importantly, get the hell out of the house. But she did neither one of those things. Neither one of those things.
The left's reactions to this allegation, not a criminal charge, not a conviction against Graham Platner, illustrate precisely why freedom for the Palestinians and an end to U.S. support for Israel will never come from the American left.
This met your standards? Your evidentiary standards?
It's trash.
Imagine the ideal political candidate. What do you see in your mind's eye? Would you picture a burly white man, muscular and well-spoken, perhaps with a Nazi tattoo? Maybe he did multiple tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, shedding blood for the empire, then signed up for an infamous mercenary company afterwards to do the same all over again. Maybe he called it the most enjoyable experience of his life, but wished he could have fought in Vietnam or against Native Americans instead. A man who, perhaps, joked that he would essay people to assert dominance. A man accused of doing exactly that to someone, but it was a Republican, so obviously she couldn't be telling the truth and it's all fine. If you're thinking, that sounds insane, why would I ever consider voting for someone like that? Never mind treating him like the rising star of the progressive movement in the United States. Well, congratulations! You reacted how you should react to the idea of a man with more red flags than a Chinese military parade. Unfortunately, this was not the opinion of many of my mainly white and mainly American colleagues on left-wing YouTube, or more specifically the liberal side of that. The attitude they had about prospective Democrat Senator for Maine, Graham Platner.
Quite literally, every single detractor of Graham Platner has outed themselves as a complete and utter piece of shit.
You know, I've said this before, I don't really care if, say, like, Bernie Sanders or AOC go home and they're a secret Nazi, but they go out and they vote for the right things. Like, we're talking about
You don't
politicians.
care?
Yeah, no, we have, like, a bunch of people, and they're making SA allegations against him, so we should definitely put yours in there, and you tell us your story, and we'll put that in there.
If I were like, if the New York Times did a deep dive into my exes, I'm not so sure that, you know, you'd be able to get as good a track record as, you know, Graham Platner seemed to like have, where, like, you know, there seems to be one particular person who, you know, we can get into, you know, like, that's very angry, and others, you know, like the more typical ambiguous disappointment from a failed relationship, and then three, you know, that, like, this is a great guy. Like, that's actually
right.
Like,
the ones who weren't a Republican operative, and I have to
Emma,
just
please go, because you've been like,
I've been on top of this. Okay, you know, this is. I as a woman, I'll use that card now. I take claims like this incredibly seriously, but I'm also quite supportive, of course, of Graham Platner's candidacy, especially when we're talking about Susan Collins, okay?
Outlets like The Majority Report, The Young Turks, and Secular Talk hyped this man up throughout every scandal you could imagine, claiming he didn't know what the Nazi tattoo meant, despite this guy being a military history nerd and reportedly telling people around him about his Totenkopf.
Okay, so this is the tattoo. You're gonna see his tattoo on the left-hand side, and then the symbol is on the right-hand side. So the symbol on the right is an insignia that was used by Nazi death's head units. So literally, it's a Nazi symbol. It's called Totenkopf. And Platner's former political director, Genevieve McDonald, wrote that Graham has an anti-Semitic tattoo on his chest. He's not an idiot. He's a military history buff. Maybe he didn't know it when he got it, but he got it years ago, and he should have it covered up because he knows damn well what it means.
He's like, look, we had a bunch of options on the wall in Croatia of like badass tattoos. I'm a Marine. I picked a skull and bones, which is very normal for Marines. I didn't know what symbol it was. No one ever told me for all this time. The minute that I find out it is, I'm like, all right, let's cover it. I had no idea. I don't want that stuff on my body.
He only confided in her that it was a Totenkopf and not all the other women that he supposedly, presumably had taken his shirt off. Like at one point you would think, I mean, I've never been with someone who has a tattoo that I didn't know what it was. You know, like one would imagine if this guy was calling it his Totenkopf or Totenkopf, and I would say incidentally, like if you asked me what a Totenkopf was and told me the name, I still wouldn't know what it was.
How does she know it's a Nazi tattoo in August of last year and you don't know it's a Nazi tattoo in August of last year?
Well, she certainly didn't send that text to me. I can't say why, but I will say that I certainly didn't know. And the text messages she's sending to friends who may have recognized it, they didn't tell me that, so.
Claiming that he'd apologized for offing brown people overseas, even though he didn't say he regretted his service so much as he regretted that the war was bad and pointless, but he was still happy to serve in it. You know, he went back multiple times, including as a private contractor for famous war crime doers Blackwater, something he bragged about, saying he wore their merch to get a rise out of people, but also that later he denied because technically it changed its name before he joined due to its reputation being dirt due to, you know, the war crimes. And that's not even to mention being stationed at Abu Ghraib. And when the first SA allegations were brought forward, they were dismissed as being a smear and a clear hit job. Now, the person making the allegations worked for the Heritage Foundation, which did raise red flags, and she did say she would vote for his opponent, but that doesn't mean that you dismiss these things out of hand, especially because another person mentioned in the original story who had her words dismissed as part of the smear later came out and told her own story. A victim forced to tell her story of her trauma to the world because people, even people whose hearts have historically been in the right place, refused to believe that a man whose CV sounds like a bad joke about the evils of the American political system could possibly have been a bad person.
What a monster. What a disgusting man. Give me a fucking break, man. Give me a break. As I said, worst smear job I've ever seen in my life, but it backfired spectacularly, and if anything, it's helping him out more.
I don't know why I was surprised by this. I resisted talking about it for a while because, one, I'm a filthy Brit, and two, it was for a primary in Maine, and I figured, as is often the case, if I talk about this race, no one's going to want to watch it, and I'd probably lose a bunch of subscribers from people who didn't want to admit that because he had principled positions on Israel and healthcare. But then I started streaming a podcast on this channel, and I ended up talking about it anyway, and I did lose some subscribers, quite a lot, actually, but it turned out I had a lot more frustration pent up about the guy, and the fact that so many usually smart people had fallen for his shtick, than I'd previously thought. I'm extremely skeptical of this guy. I mean, if I was there, I probably would not. I
hard
definitely wouldn't vote for him. I mean, you've got to have a red line somewhere. And I think being a war criminal is a pretty big one, especially after the revolunteering. And like, yeah, there's a road to redemption you could go down, and you can prove that you're trying to change. And I get a lot of people think that he's done that work. I don't think he's done enough of that work at all. Not at all. He's not expressed true regret for anything that he's done. He's really downplayed the Blackwater thing, like he pretends it wasn't, because they changed their name. Like he just got away with the Nazi tattoo thing. Like we would never let anyone else get away with anything remotely like that. It got to the point where it was starting to look like if you just said the right things, you could fool a certain number of people with huge platforms, ostensibly and sometimes actually on the left, into promoting you. What he'd done to innocent people in Iraq should have been a red line. When the guy was revealed to have a Nazi tattoo, that should have been a red line. And there are a ton of other red lines since. At a certain point, it really started to look like there were no red lines for some people. This guy could have, to borrow a phrase from another piece of shit, shot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue and his poll numbers would only go up. Few other people in politics have ever had people twisting themselves in knots trying to justify continuing to support a man with a shadier past than the fucking Joker than this guy. At least outside of right-wing circles. How many people get tattoos that they thought looked cool but didn't understand the meaning of? How many vets took mercenary work for a period because the US doesn't support them? How many young men have shitposted online? Do we want an authentic working class party or not? President Platner. Platner could have sexted my mom and I'd still vote for him. I'll stop there because this could go on for hours. You know, it's not lost on me that many Americans, even those who have gone through a political evolution and come around to socialist politics, have a reverence for veterans that's really bizarre to most other people on the planet.
My daddy served in the army. Thank you, USA. You are my best friend.
Those f***ing Yankees. Clearly this is not going over well with Americans.
People act like these guys are heroes, even when the US hasn't fought a war since World War II that was in any way justifiable, or about anything other than imperial expansion, resource extraction, or compromising millions to a permanent end for daring to try implementing socialism or allying with their perceived enemies. And even in World War II, the US dropped 2 atomic bombs on civilians and threw Japanese people into camps. The military worship has always come across as weird and gross to me. That isn't to say that people can't be redeemed or that veterans cannot become good people. I think people can and should be forgiven, even for really bad stuff, if they do the work. They need to actually repent. And for doing multiple tours in Iraq, you need to do a lot of work. Work that Platner just hadn't done enough of, in my opinion. He'd done some things, he joined the SRA and he taught other people to use stuff, but that's not enough. For some, apparently, doing what he did to the Iraqi people is fine, or at least something that they can look past as a part of a dark past. I have Iraqi family. This shit is serious to me. People from Iraq are not hypothetical humans in a far-off place whose untimely ends at the hands of US and UK and coalition weapons can be dismissed. And I think too many people, especially in the US, have learned to turn off their empathy when it comes to people outside of their own country, especially if those people are brown, and especially if those people are brown and Muslim. Either way, more people than I hoped didn't think that brown people's lives mattered than I thought. Either that, or people have a very generous idea of what it means to make amends for the awful things someone has done, or are very quick to forgive. What the man said about his past was nowhere near close to an adequate apology, and he certainly hadn't done enough work to begin to make things right. he certainly hasn't done anything to try and make it even the slightest bit up to the people of Iraq, for example, even if that's something that's possible. I mean, would you forgive someone who enthusiastically came to your country to mow down your friends and family and reminisced online about how much he loved it? I might think it's possible for anyone to make amends, but it's not up to me to forgive this man. It's up to the people he wronged, and not even I think that he has done anything close to enough. What do you think they think? Everyone should have red lines, and Platner walked past red line after red line over and over again and got away with it, because he had some decent policies and he looked the part to the kind of people who conflate the business of people's lives with celebrity culture or playing with action figures. He looks like a G.I. Joe. But if your G.I. Joe had a Nazi tattoo, it might lead you to ask some follow-up questions like, what war are these GIs fighting in anyway? And why? And why are we acting like going overseas to terrorize innocent people is a fun idea for a toy line and media franchise for our kids, who we presumably want to teach that ending people's lives is wrong?
Have you looked at our caps recently? They've got skulls on them. Are we the baddies?
And then there was a red line. More essay allegations, this time from someone who shared his professed politics, thus her waiting to come out with a full story. Some people apologized.
But outside of the platform, there were so many things for so long sort of dripping out. And you you stood by Platner through a lot. What made these allegations different to you?
Prior to this allegation, the New York Times piece spoke about unsettling behavior, and the worst of the accusation in that piece was about aggressive grabbing and excessive drinking. And a lot of what I read in that piece sounded like the symptoms of PTSD that he had described. And I felt that it's important that the left is an open space for veterans who've experienced that kind of trauma so that they can have some sort of redemption arc. And I bought into that narrative. It makes total sense to me that like somebody drunken in the military gets a dumb tattoo with a bunch of their friends and maybe doesn't know about it.
I mean, that does make sense to me, but like if I knew I had a Nazi tattoo, I would be so ashamed. I would like scrub that thing from my body, which he eventually did. But like as soon as I knew, I would be like, oh crap, right?
I think you can look back on that now and say, yes, perhaps there's an arrogance and a level of, narcissism. His Reddit history showed that he was quite left-wing. And so I did think that that was a contradiction. And I was dismissive of the tattoo for that very reason. And I think the Nazi thing was a bit overplayed because of his desire to paint him as an anti-Semite because he wants to cut off arms to Israel.
And then some have continued to deny these allegations, resorting to misogyny and victim blaming to try and salvage the career of their favourite soldier turned mercenary with a Nazi tattoo and a horrendous past with women. And again, I am not sure why this surprised me. I should know what to expect at this point. Especially since the loudest of these deniers were Cenk and Anna at the Young Turks.
Everyone has withdrawn their endorsement of Platner, and I think the allegations are suspicious. I'm just going to say it.
Was he targeted? Oh, there's no question. I mean, you'd have to be brain dead. You'd have to be Mitch McConnell not to see that he was targeted. It was one thing after another. His tattoos, his Reddit posts, his every girlfriend is contacted by the New York Times. Why?
If someone entered my home and forcibly me, I would not allow the individual who forcibly that's violent, right? To remain in my home and sleep it off. But that is what she did. She alleges that he was so drunk that she didn't want to tell him to leave because he might harm someone on the road. He's just forcibly you, right? Call the cops. Or, more importantly, get the hell out of the house. But she did neither one of those things. Neither one of those things. Personally, as a woman, if someone me, I wouldn't call them consensually challenged. So she didn't tell her therapist about it at the time. She didn't file a police report. She apparently told an ex-boyfriend who she started dating in 2022 about the incident, although she was very vague about it, because it places us in this unbearable position of having to adjudicate something that should have been adjudicated in a court of law if this actually took place.
Hey, I just had an interesting thought. Yeah, actually, fuck this.
Victim blaming is a problem on all sides of the political spectrum. On the right, it's practically mandatory. When Brett Kavanaugh, for example, was faced with serious allegations while Donald Trump tried to rush him into a Supreme Court seat, for example, the right championed the man and denigrated his victim, seeing it as a conservative versus liberal fight, and assuming because she was less right-wing than him and because she was a woman and he was a man, that she must have been lying to try and deprive the Trump administration of a Supreme Court justice. When Joe Biden was credibly accused, many liberals and even some supposedly on the left minimized the claims, dismissing them as either lies, too far in the past to speak to his character, or a smear from one of the other candidates for Democratic nominee in 2020. And there are certain leftist creators on this website who have also faced credible and corroborated accusations, and those that were cis white men especially faced no consequences at all for this behaviour and continue to be way more popular than they or their content deserves to be. But I'm not going to pretend that the right is not worse for this, of course, especially since you can so clearly see how far and how disgusting they get with this shit, for political reasons, even if they wouldn't recognise them as such. Just look at the way they talk about George Floyd. No matter how often they saw the video evidence of the unjustifiable end of an innocent man by the police, they, to this day, make fun of his last words and claim that he was an alcoholic and it was actually a complete coincidence that a cop's knee happened to be pressing down on his neck in a way that is widely known to be fatal when he succumbed to completely unrelated and often racially charged reasons why he was fated to pass anyway. But this instinct to defend people that we consider our tribe, to disbelieve people no matter how believable their stories and no matter what evidence is presented, who are opposed to our politics or identity or just aren't as close to us as the accused is on a personal level, is unfortunately present in many of us, maybe even all of us. It's an instinct that we have to fight, especially if we want to see justice and fairness and to have marginalized people get a decent shot at a life of happiness and dignity. Now, why would you consider a man who proudly went to do war crimes multiple times, joked about pissing on the remains of people he'd done crimes to, guarded the war crime central hub in the Iraq War, volunteered for Blackwater knowing what they'd done, had a history of extremely bigoted statements, had a Nazi tattoo, all of the other stuff? I will never understand that. But clearly it happened to a lot of people who are usually well-meaning. Even people from the Majority Report and Kyle Kalinske, two of the most prolific glazers of this horrible man, came forward and disavowed him. They still, for the most part, don't seem to think that most of the stuff before this was a red flag, but at least they got there eventually, I suppose. Although I can't really say that I trust their judgment on candidates that much anymore, especially after Emma Vigeland went on to say that she would vote for people who were Nazis in secret if it meant getting some good political policies passed. I realised she was trying to be glib, but think about how that sounds. And in fact, some people really took the piss with this. Ken Klippenstein, for instance, wrote a piece about how he's not sorry at all for backing a man with the CV and psychological profile of a Marvel villain that would get written out of the final cut of a movie for being too unrealistically evil, and that he couldn't possibly have known that he was a wrong-un. But that's not victim blaming. That's just being stupid. What we saw from the Young Turks and from Ryan Grimm at Dropsite and some of his colleagues, though they have publicly backed down on this a little bit, is genuinely disgusting, and its behaviour you can only justify by your allegiance to the idea of this one man being more important to you than the suffering of his victims. You have to make his victims matter less in your mind and him matter more. Dismiss the suffering and minimise it in a way that betrays that, maybe Anna Kasparian is not the feminist that she thinks she is, but I could have told you that after she decided that she hated trans people and got us all calling the show The Young Turfs. Believe women only if they're cis, agree with her politics, and don't say anything bad about any of the men that she admires. Very protecting women and girls of you. Protecting women and girls, I suppose, from dangerous trannies that might be peeing within earshot of a poor white Karen, and not from the man who went to Iraq because he wanted to... I hate YouTube. Unalive some people. And has now had multiple women come out accusing him of the kind of things that you think trans people are doing just by existing near them. Things that he fantasized about doing previously in his Reddit comments, for example. You can't have it both ways. Either you care about the suffering of women and girls, or you don't. It's not feminist or progressive to dismiss allegations out of hand because it serves your political interests to do so. It's victim blaming, and in fact it poisons the very politics you claim to be pushing for, tainting it, making it impure. To truly want a more egalitarian world, you have to be consistent. By deciding that you can dismiss misogynistic violence on a case-by-case basis, depending on who's done it, you allow for more exceptions, and you admit that for your political project, liberating women from patriarchal violence and this culture is not going to happen. Only if someone is a victim to someone you believe deserves to be brought down will they have a chance at justice. Hey, you know who else thinks like this? Republicans. Seems like you're agreeing with them a lot lately, Anna. The transphobia, the crime panic going on Tucker Carlson and other far-right shows trying to find common ground with MAGA. Maybe you're just right-wing. And weirdly, for someone who seems to recognize that a lot needs to change in this world, your victim blaming comes straight out of observations of a just world bias. Time to get into some science.
The just world bias happens because our brains crave predictability, and as such, we tend to blame victims of unfairness rather than reject the comforting worldview suggesting that good will be rewarded and evil punished. There's just this really powerful urge for people to want to think good things happen to good people, and where the misperception comes in is that there's this implied opposite. If something bad has happened to you, you must have done something bad to deserve that bad thing, says Sherry Hamby, a professor of psychology at Sewanee University. First formulated by Melvin Lerner in the early 1960s, the just world bias can be seen in any situation in which victims are blamed for their own misfortune, whether it be abuse, SA, crime, or poverty. Lerner's original experiments involved women who were asked to observe what appeared to be learning by punishment. When the learner, actually an actor, gave the wrong answer, she received painful electric shocks. Afterwards, observers were asked to describe how they felt about the victim, how likeable or morally worthy she appeared to be. One group of women that just saw the victim get repeatedly shocked tended to derogate her, but another group, which before being asked to characterize the victim was told that she was not seriously harmed, did not engage in victim blaming. Lerner explained these results suggested that seeing innocent people get hurt with no resolution of the situation violated the observer's sense of the world as just. In order to reduce the threat, they saw the victim as deserving of her fate. Several other iterations of his experiments show that the more innocent the experimenters made the victim seem in an unresolved situation, the more she was devalued. Studies by others on various types of victimization, including poverty, have since borne these ideas out. And this, ultimately, is born out of a perceived threat to one's worldview. For Anna and other people, victim blaming those who Platner hurt, the idea that he is the kind of person who could do that thing threatens their fundamental belief in how the world does and should work. For them, Platner being a progressive champion, incorruptible despite his past, is a load-bearing belief. And when they are told that this is in fact true, they act, to paraphrase Dr. Laura Niemi from her time at Duke University, defensively against facts, with the potential to unravel their personal worldview. This is an observed phenomenon on people who share certain moral principles, or as Dr. Niemi put it, binding values. Which spells trouble, of course, for those of us who want to push towards a more just and equitable world, because our need for solidarity and unity
fundamentally will come into conflict with this instinctual drive to defend those who stand with us but have wronged others. Wrongs that would usually be considered a transgression of those very values that bind us together. We have to be able to confront ourselves and hold to our principles, despite however much we may respect or even admire someone, to build the world we want to see. We need to be able to fight that base instinct and come to a just and logical conclusion, even when it might hurt us. Niemi conducted a series of experiments with her colleague Liane Young to try and better explain the tendency, which they published in 2016. They found that people who have higher levels of what are known as binding values, a set of moral principles which help groups cohere, are more likely to see victims as at least partially responsible for their fates. These may come into tension with individualizing values, which have to do with treating everyone fairly. People who have a high level of binding values, for example, might support severe punishment for disloyalty because they view protecting the group as more important than sparing the individual. Research finds that these values track political orientation pretty closely. Conservatives have traditionally placed greater emphasis on binding values, while liberals tend to prioritize individualizing values. As we're seeing now with regard to both poverty and violence against women, Republicans use the idea that victims are undeserving for political gain. But the fact that we have this victim-blaming tendency, which is enhanced when people fear threats to their group or society, does not mean that it is immutable. The authors found that there was a simple way to minimize it. In another experiment in their study, Niemi and Young compared victim blaming among people who had been exposed to stories that spotlighted either the perpetrator or the victim. When the language focused around the perpetrator's actions, victim blaming decreased. Of course, that is not to say that this is not a mistake left-wingers make, just because Anna Kasparian and Cenk have long since moved further to the right. They do. And no matter how much we try to make our brains purely principle, we will still have some of these binding values within us. You cannot unlearn everything overnight. The fact that so many left-wingers dismissed all allegations prior to this latest one is proof of this. They had a red line, yes, but there were so many things before that should have been their red lines, and most of them have not taken accountability for this, or recognised that it was even a problem to support him in the first place, aside from him betraying their trust or hiding that he was a piece of shit when, yeah, a lot of people, and most black people, most marginalised people in general, some white people too, were telling you this. The kind of people who see a muscular white man who served in the army and instinctively have their guard up, for whatever reason, knowing the kind of things that cis white men, and particularly soldiers, have done and continue to do. But if you're the kind of person that sees someone like Platner and feels safe, or pictures a G.I. Joe or a guy on a poster or a man you'd love to have a drink with, you're already off to a bad start. You're coming in with a bias, whether you know it or not. If you're going into a process where you're supposed to be objective about someone, almost impossible in general by the way, already charmed by them, is it going to take a lot more than it should to snap you out of that? I think it might. You can see this in, for example, the way certain people in this space dismiss criticism of Platner. Kalinske and, to a lesser extent, Hassan, got quite frustrated with people looking for leftist purity. And while I do think that there's an extent to which purity politics can get you in the mud, dismissing everyone who's not yourself as not left enough if you go way too far, a little bit of purity testing, fair amount of purity testing, say enough to dismiss someone who enjoys ending the lives of brown people overseas for the Empire and has a Nazi tattoo, that level of purity testing is sorely needed. The fact that people could see past that, even if the guy had completely changed in the time since, is quite worrying. And when feds, for example, try to infiltrate your movement, which they will, getting extremely attached to people, despite glaring red flags, is going to do way worse than getting you bogged down in purity politics. And what's worse than this is trying to make out that Platner was some sort of antidote to what people saw as the excesses of Me Too or Woke One, which every time I hear this, it's genuinely infuriating. No, Me Too did not go too far. Only Harvey Weinstein and Kevin Spacey really faced any consequences. Louis C.K. is back doing specials, and we managed to hold the knowledge of the horrors that Epstein associates like Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, and Prince Andrew perpetuated, and yet they all remain free, relatively unscathed, and incredibly powerful. Their victims are slowly found dead in suspicious circumstances. And to the extent that Woke One was annoying in any way, it was because there were many people who were resistant to following through on the principles we as a society were beginning to realise were necessary for a just world, and make the step from a politics of integration to liberation, and address class as an issue. None of this is solved by a Graham Platner, in any sense, and if you think someone having an awful murderous past is somehow punk rock, you really need to rethink how you came to that conclusion and make sure you don't go down that thought process again. And this goes double for those who responded to this latest scandal by victim blaming. Fundamentally, this is misogynistic and cruel. And if you engage in this form of extremely in-your-face misogyny, if you would rather blame the victim of this misogynistic abuse than even consider the fact that someone you thought highly of might have done something wrong, you do not deserve to have a platform. You are not objective, you are not progressive, you are not interested in liberation, you are certainly not interested in feminism, and you are hurting the movement by painting these actions as acceptable. Hey, when you're watching this video all the way to the end, if you liked this video, give it a hype, give it a hype, give it a hype, 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 like it, leave a comment, subscribe, and hype again, subscribe if you click the bell and hype. Smash that, all the buttons, tell all your friends, share it with everyone you know, your grandma, your grand aunt. For everything else, let me do the pitch. Let me do my pitch for please giving me money. I've been super swamped recently, as you can probably tell, by a lot of things that have been happening. First of all, I cut all caffeine out to get on ADHD medication, and then I've been titrating the ADHD medication. I had massive withdrawal from the caffeine, and the medicine took a lot of adjusting to. Oh, and then I got like really, really sick. And a lot of other stuff happened, and I went through a breakup and all this stuff. There's a lot of things happened. It's been a time. It's been a time. And so I'm quite down on my luck a little bit. I mean, I have been for quite a while, but it's really starting to feel like I need to take action. Maybe that's the ADHD meds talking, but I think I need to be more proactive with this. So I'm going to stop berating myself in my head for asking for money and just fucking ask for it. I would really, really like it if as many of you joined my Patreon as possible, even if it's just a little bit. I've been back in the UK for like 6 months, maybe a bit more now, probably more, and I'd really like to eventually get out of my overdraft and start being able to save up to get out of my parents' house and have a normal, independent life again. And if you want to help out with that, you know, it's a modest goal for most people in a pretty normal time, but these are dark times, and I really recognize a lot of people don't have money, and also, you know, maybe you don't like me enough, that's fine. But if you do want to help, you can always give me one-time donations on Ko-fi or PayPal, links below, or better yet, send it to my Patreon or maybe my YouTube memberships. These would really, really help and go so far towards me being back on my feet to pull my life together before my, oh god, 35th birthday. Probably unlikely because that's October the 10th, but if you do that, I'd be really, really happy. So if you sign up to my Patreon or my YouTube memberships, remember you get early videos, uncensored videos, access to members only Discord, Nintendo Switch friend code, exclusive content, long-form interviews with people I've had before on the show, and you'll get, if you sign up, your name read out at the end of each video, like these lovely people. Violet Evergarden, Kamui, AX, Robin McCallan, Montana, Schmidtbauer, Zach Bevan, Meow Miaski, Eva Kebab, Marty Hunt, Jane Luciferian, Melissa Allen, Sarah Francesca Smith, Lawrence M, Mongolian Shaman, Spurious Machinery, Tor Nielsen, Lulu Patterson, Scuzzbopper, T. Rook, Serena D, Karena Kiriako, David Cropper, Harlow, Di Muerta, ADHD, Dan-shaped blob. Achoo, graffitia underscore. Ekachu, join a fart too. Cat, read this fart noise out. Uncast shadow of a southern myth. Rain, Will, Alexandra Barnes, Reesenet, Ken Sorden. Hello, Kirsty. Yes, you, Kirsty. Hi. I'm talking to you. Can you hear me? Georgie, Carlito Del Mozzote, Anna Nicholson, Dungeon Slime, Naomi Gorman, Melody, Heidi Law, Transform and Function, Cara Patching, Mattia98, Liv Dawn, Spin Noir, Victor Lufgren, Gil the Gilded Dragon, A Slice of Cake, Rue, Mal Tian, Gina Surface, You Are Made Off Stupid, Tomite, Melissa Jackson, Ren, approves your stuff, thank you, Ren. Minstrel, of course, that's your name. Not Millistrel, that's not a real word. Jeffrey on, Tom, not Tom. Let me start that again. It's a good title. Tom, the not quite so brave as Sir Lancelot. Had to do it justice. LFR, Treequoy, Ariella, Frogwa, Robin Rocks, Emily Eisenberg, Garlic Escape, Kira B, No Sparkling Heart, Corey, Jana J, Might in the Sword, Imogen Q, Luciano Frias Andrade, Adam, Harry, Ender 191, Quesadilla de Tortilla Azul, Leron, Adam Lees, Daniel Nevels, No Not That Paul, MB, Wandering Wonder, Ashley Murphy, Lex Phoenix, Enter Credits, Mira D, J Senior, Boa Ea, James W, Deborah Laboon, Zillas Athenaeum, Vince Whitaker, Amelia Lissette J, Frank McManus, Susan Foster, Helena Real, Sierra Whiskey, Alley Cat Girl, John N, Lloyd Luciente, Jason Cribbett, Raven Tempest, Shield Aiden, Robin Podolsky, Nightlight Plushy Jesus, Manta Ray, Courtney Burmack, Sleepy Slug, Silver Piglet, Brain Douche, Artie Wolf, Deanna McMillan, Caroline Reglado, Alexandra Lilly, and Howard Lott. Thank you all so much for your help. You are the reason I can still sleep at night because I'm not completely fucked yet. Love you all. Have a wonderful, wonderful time. Thank God that guy is gone. Very sorry if you liked him, but I hope you can realize now why we were skeptical. All right, laters.
Why skulls, then? I really can't think of anything worse as a symbol than a skull.
It's trash.